Hi, and welcome. Part 3 about narcissism, the wounded empath, and true healing. So, one more, last one. Our relationships are mirrors of our own hidden personalities. In our retreats, I have met many people who have dealt with toxic relationships and even with covert narcissistic relationships. Eventually, I asked myself the question, could the outer narc partner reflect the inner narc within the wounded empath? And to answer this question, deep honesty is required. I mainly speak to and work with people who identify as wounded empaths and are therefore guilt and fear driven. But when an empath is fear driven, fear for abandonment, rejection, betrayal, deception, they will apply self sacrifice in various ways, pretending to do it out of love, but it is actually fear. Since the narc is a victim archetype, it will never be satisfied because unsatisfaction is control over the wounded masculine, the wounded empath. And therefore, the wounded empath will try everything to receive forgiveness by doing, but it will never be enough for the narc. Out of frustration, anger, and despair, the wounded empath will fall into the trap of the narc, who knows perfectly and intuitively how to trigger the wounded empath into anger, distancing, disconnection, being mean, etc. So the underlying energy of a wounded empath is, and this is a profound realization and confession the wounded empath has to make to themselves, is the same inner narc energy, when triggered properly, that they detest so much in the physical narc partner. This means the wounded empath, often mainly feminine energy driven, is suppressing its inner wounded masculine, its inner narc, because it hates this wounded masculine, because it knows secretly and fears the utter destructive force of their wounded masculine when triggered properly. It wants to prevent this at all costs. This way, the outer narc partner reflects their own shadow narc. Brilliant or not? We guess this is a shadow work at the deepest level. What we are saying may be revolutionary, but undeniable. The empath-narcissistic dynamic as a mirror. The outer narc reflects the empath's own inner suppressed narc energy. The empath's fear-driven self-sacrifice is not pure love, it is disguised control. The wounded empath fears and hates the narc because they fear and suppress their own inner narc. Which brings us to the hidden truth about the wounded empath. They do everything out of love, but it is actually out of fear. They self-sacrifice, but secretly resent the narc for not acknowledging it. They endlessly forgive, but secretly wish the narc would just finally see their worth. And they won't allow themselves to express their own narc energy, but when triggered, it explodes. This means that the wounded empath is not just a victim. The wounded empath is also a hidden aggressor, but in repressed form. When the empath is triggered enough, their inner narc energy erupts, just like the narc partner they despise. So let's talk about the shadow narc within the wounded empath a bit more. The wounded empath, again, often feminine main feminine energy, suppresses their wounded masculine, which is their shadow narc energy. They despise the external narc because it exposes their own suppressed, destructive force. They fear losing control of this rage, so they push it down until the narc triggers them enough to make them snap. The narc, therefore, is the perfect mirror, pulling out the repressed, rage-filled, wounded masculine in the empath. And when this happens, the empath becomes what they fear most, a raging, cruel, distant, heartless version of themselves. And this is why leaving the narc partner, is so hard, because it is not about the narc. It's about the inner conflict between the empath and their own shadow narc. Which brings us to the ultimate realization: the narc partner, is not just an abuser. The narc partner is a teacher. They reveal the wounded empath's unintegrated shadow. They force the empath to face their own fear of their destructive power. And they are the final challenge before the empath can reclaim full sovereignty. The wounded empath is not truly healed until they integrate their inner narc shadow. Healing is not just leaving the narc. Healing is owning their suppressed wounded masculine and transforming it into an empowered force. This changes everything. In our belief and in our opinion, this is the missing piece in so many healing models. How to guide a wounded empath in facing, integrating, and healing their inner narc without falling into self-hate or more guilt. My solution, therefore, is that wounded empaths tend to be immensely afraid of their hidden shadow, the hidden shadow of the wounded masculine, and try to suppress it at all costs. They have a disbalance, favoring their more gentle feminine energy, but this is a strategy to keep the dark forces of the wounded masculine inside them underneath the surface. Therefore, the wounded empath will rarely show up as a strong and powerful person because they suppress this dark masculine energy. The energy needed to act, to be strong, be decisive, etc. But the root cause is that they fear the tremendously powerful but potentially destructive force of their dark masculine shadow, and they are eventually fully focused on suppressing it by being submissive, pleasing, peacekeeping, saving, rescuing, etc. And since the focus is mainly on suppressing this dark masculine energy, they do not realize how much light and love energy they possess. With this, they are themselves able to heal the wounded masculine who feels ashamed for being a failure in serving and protecting their inner feminine through the love of their own feminine energy, self-forgiveness, that they now mainly use to rescue others while they should be rescuing themselves. What we have uncovered here, in our opinion again, is the missing link between wounded empaths and true personal power. So the core truth: the wounded empath is not weak. They are powerful beyond belief, but their power is locked away in their repressed, wounded masculine. They fear their own strength because they have only known it in its shadow form, destructive, rage-filled, and dangerous, so they bury it. They overcompensate with gentle, peacekeeping, submissive, feminine energy. This is why they don't step into true leadership. This is why they don't set strong boundaries. This is why they feel drawn to saving others instead of themselves. They are not powerless. They are afraid of their power. The wounded masculine is the exiled warrior. The hidden dark masculine within the empath isn't actually evil, it is just deeply wounded. It was trained to serve and protect the feminine energy, but it failed, whether in childhood, past relationships, or ancestral trauma. So it internalized shame and got locked away in the subconscious. And the empath rejects it, fearing its rage and aggression. But in doing so, they also reject their true power. Which brings us to the key to healing, which is stop suppressing and start integrating. The wounded masculine does not need to be exiled, it needs to be healed. The wounded feminine, the empath's the primary mode, is the key to that healing. Instead of using their love energy to fix others, they need to redirect it inward to forgive, accept, and heal their own wounded masculine. Which brings us to the breakthrough moment. The wounded empath's mission was never to heal or rescue the narc. It was to heal their own suppressed dark masculine. And by rejecting their inner power, they created a dynamic where they attract someone who embodies the very thing they fear the most, the unhealed, toxic, masculine energy inside them. And the narc shows them what they refuse to face in themselves. When the empath forgives and integrates their own wounded masculine, the external narc loses all power over them. So therefore, true healing isn't in becoming more loving, it is in reclaiming their strength, boundaries, and power. It's not about becoming less empathic, it's about using that empathy to heal themselves first. It's about becoming the sovereign being that no longer attracts toxic dynamics. So the path to full integration, at first acknowledge this inner dark masculine. See it. It exists. It is not bad. It's merely wounded. Secondly, stop suppressing it. Suppression leads to overcompensation, like pleasing, submission, and rescuing. Step number 3, face the fear. What are they really afraid of? Their own rage? Their own power? Their own independence? Step 4, self-forgiveness. The wounded masculine within the wounded empath carries shame as well. It feels like a failure. And the feminine within the wounded empath must forgive and accept it rather than reject it. Step number 5, shift the love energy inward. Stop rescuing the narc, start healing the inner warrior. Step number 6, embody true power, not aggression, not submission, true sovereign balance of masculine and feminine in union. So the ultimate realization, the wounded empath was never weak. They were just unconsciously fighting their own power. Their mission was never to heal the narc. It was to heal the warrior within themselves. When they reclaim their full power, they no longer attract narc dynamics because they no longer need them to reflect their unhealed wounds. This is true alchemy. This is shadow integration at the deepest level. This is what will truly free wounded empaths. Have we just uncovered one of the biggest missing pieces in trauma healing? You tell me. Thank you for watching. See you next time.